All right, we're going to go over the anatomy of the skull. There is 8 bones in the skull. We're going to start with, let's go ahead and pick out all 8. So here is the frontal. You've got the right and left parietals, the green ones here. You got the occipital in the back. And to the side, you will be able to see the red one is the sphenoid, and the brown one is the temporal bone. You have right and left temporals. There. Now, there is a bone back here. It actually is yellow, and it is kind of deep inside this area, so it's not really visual. It's kind of in the center of the skull. Now, there are sutures, which are joints of the skull. These sutures, right here, the one going across this way is the coronal. The one between the 2 parietals is the sagittal. The one back here around the occipital is the lambdoidal. Then around the temporal, each temporal bone is the squamosal suture. Now, in the infant, these points here where the suture lines meet is actually what we refer to, most people generically call these the soft spots, but we actually, technically and medically, they are called the fontanelles. They're named for where they're at. This is the anterior, and in the adult, once those suture lines close up and the fontanelles close up, it actually is referred to as the bregma. So, anterior bregma, anterior fontanelle, bregma in the adult. Back here is the, this is actually the lambdoidal suture, and this is the lambda in the adult, where the sagittal suture comes into contact with the lambdoidal suture. Now, in the fontanelle in the infant, this is referred to as the posterior. So you got the anterior, posterior. Anterior becomes the bregma, posterior fontanelle. In the adult becomes the lambda. So that should be easy to remember, lambdoidal, lambda. Now these on the side are basically named for where they're at. You've got the right and left sphenoid fontanelles, and those become the pterions in the adult. Back here, you have this area right here where the lambdoidal and the squamosal meet. You have the mastoid fontanelles. So I always remember that, and the mastoid becomes the asteron. So always remember the term mass ass. So that is the mastoid fontanelle becomes the asteron. So just remember mass ass and you got it. All right, so that covers the sutures. Now the sutures are joints. They are, in the adult, they are immovable, also known as synarthroidal joints. They are fibrous joints. So that's all you need to know about the sutures, the fontanelles, and the endpoints of the sutures in the adult. All right, so next we're going to talk about the frontal bone. The frontal bone basically has 2 parts. This part right here is referred to as the vertical or squamosal, the squamous portion. Underneath here, where it kind of rounds in, it becomes the roof of the orbits. This is the horizontal portion, also known as the orbital portion. Now, there's a lot of landmarks here that we are going to talk about. There's tubercles right up here, the frontal tubercles or tuberosities right here. There is right here under, if you lay your index fingers across your eyebrows right now, you're going to feel a ridge of bone. That ridge of bone right there is the superciliary ridge. If you ever think about a Cro-Magnon or caveman and have that big ridge of bone there, that's basically what that is, the superciliary ridge. Now, right above there, if you take your finger and you're laying it on your eyebrows, You roll your finger up a little bit, there's going to be a groove. That's the supraorbital groove, SOG. Underneath here, you've got the orbits, and you've got this top part of the orbit is the supraorbital margin, right there. Let's go ahead and finish out the orbit here. You've got the supraorbital margin, which is part of the frontal bone. Over here to the side, you've got the mid-lateral orbital margin. Underneath here, infraorbital margin. So just remember, supra means above, so that's the top one. Mid-lateral, infra. So it's just means it's below. All right, and those are the parts of the frontal bone. All right, let's move on to the parietals. Now, those are the easiest ones. The parietals, basically, you have a left and right one. The sagittal suture, separating them here. Now, the parietals, so super easy. You basically have two bumps right here. You can probably feel them. It's not as evident on this skull that we have here. But if you run your hands along the sides of your skull, you're going to be able to feel two bumps. These are parietal tubercles. What's important about those is that this is the widest portion of your skull. You can actually measure from one parietal tubercle to the other and get the actual width of the skull. All right, so that's basically all you need to know about the parietals. So they're easy bones. Let's talk about the occipital. Now, we're talking about these four bones here because this is the skull cap. The 8 bones in the skull, you can divide them into the cranium or skull cap, and then the base of the skull, also known as the floor. So we're going to talk about, we're doing the skull cap right now, and then we'll break this thing apart and do the skull cap. I mean the floor of the cranium. All right, so occipital bone. This is the posterior aspect of your skull. Basically, this is also referred to as a squamous portion. Some of the most important elements of the occipital bone. There is a bump. If you can all reach the back of your head right now, you can actually feel a bump off the back. That is called the inion. It's also the occipital protuberance as well. I always call it inion because I feel like it's just easier. Now, here, of course, is where the spinal cord comes down, and this is, of course, is the foramen magnum. So it is also part of the occipital bone. Now, on each side, there's a condylar processes here, and this articulates with the superior portion of C1, also known as the atlas. So don't forget, if you get the atlas and the axis mixed up, just always remember that T comes before X in the alphabet. And so just remember that C1 is the atlas and C2 is the axis. All right? So these are the most important elements. The inion and the condylar processes here, and the foramen magnum, where the spinal cord comes down through your vertebrae. All right, so that gets the 4 skull caps, the bones of the skull cap, the cranium. So I'm going to break this thing apart, and we're going to come back and cover the 4 bones that make up the base of the skull, also known as the floor of the cranium. Okay, students, in order to do great positioning of the skull and facial bones, you've got to know your superficial landmarks. So let's go over those now. Between the eyebrows, you have the glabella. Right below that, at the bridge of the nose, you have the nasion. Then down where the upper lip and nose meet, you have the acanthion. And then at the chin, right in the center, you have the mental point. All right, students, let's go over the positioning lines for skull work. So we're going to start with the EAM. That's where all the lines originate. So let's go there, and we're going to go to the glabella. There's the glabello-meatal line, the orbital meatal line, also known as the OML, infraorbital meatal line, the IOML, the acantho-meatal line, AML, the lips meatal line, would be the LML. And then you have the mentomeatal line, which is the MML, right there. So these lines matter when you're doing your positioning. So make sure that you have these memorized.